When you're just wandering around with no purpose, with nothing to do, that's usually when you get in trouble.
Someone's curious if you've ever been in trouble with the law.
I've been smoking in the car all day long, and sure enough, lights start flashing in the rearview mirror, and I'm like, I am done. I was an entirely different person. But where I had a huge fear was stepping over the line to posting videos on YouTube. If I gain the applause of the crowds, but I lose the love and respect of my children, I believe I've failed.
Welcome back to the Think Media Podcast. Sean, this is going to be a fun episode because the team sent in some questions. They're anonymous, they're kind of personal, and they're going to be fun. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. I have no idea what to expect, but I am here for it.
Basically, I asked the team, how many people do we have on the team now?
I think we have 16 W-2 employees and like 8 contractors.
Amazing. So, I just said, hey, we are doing a podcast episode. Ask Sean anything, and we got some really cool questions. We'll start off a little easy. The first question, and these just kind of range, but if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
If I could have any superpower, it would be unlimited energy. I think I love doing what I do. And now I'm 39, though. As I approach 40, I'm noticing that I do not have the same energy I did in my 20s. I've been dealing with some, kind of like health challenges in terms of pain in my arms and hands. And so I think that's the allure of the superhumans, is they're an amplification of the limitations of our human bodies. And so if I just had, it's not even fancy, if I just had the energy to just do everything I want to do every day nonstop. But I'm grateful for rest, because just meaning that like if you never got tired, I don't know if that'd be a life of the right rhythms, because rest is cool and margin. But
so this is a good follow-up to the next one, which is if you weren't doing YouTube, what would you be, if you could do anything, what would you be doing if it wasn't YouTube?
If I wasn't doing YouTube, I would probably want to work in advertising. Maybe like I think about Mad Men, or I think about working in an advertising agency of some kind, being able to work on creative brand campaigns. I think also maybe, which I do this, I guess I do more than YouTube. I speak now. I could see being like a professional speaker, or if you speak for a living, like write books and speak for a living, which you could argue I do in a way do that, but I'd maybe do that full time, like somebody that travels and speaks or is like a speaker. Yeah.
This is another question, which is, have you ever had a fear of public speaking or being on camera?
I think I've always had some level of confidence for communication publicly. We were in a small youth group. That's kind of where I got my start in video and in some public speaking in Marysville, Washington. But where I had a huge fear was stepping over the line to posting videos on YouTube, meaning putting yourself out there. I had a fear of other people's opinions, fear of being judged, fear of not being good enough, so in a smaller context, I think it kind of came naturally, but in a put yourself on the internet context, for sure, I had a lot of fear.
So if you weren't on YouTube, like you couldn't choose YouTube as a platform, what social media platform would you pick? Like, I think just to be on, Yeah.
I mean, I still probably would go, at this point, I'd probably go Instagram, because you can express yourself in a lot of different ways there, because you got stories, you could have still pictures and carousels. It's a lot of different storytelling, as well as lives and videos and reels. So it's more than anywhere else. And Facebook is Facebook, and TikTok kind of is different. It doesn't have those features. So Instagram seems to be the place where you could express creativity, and socially, I feel like I'm pretty well connected there. That's where I like to hang out.
I don't know who asked this, but someone's curious if you've ever been in trouble with the law. I want to hear a good story here.
Okay, so I want to say I've never been in trouble with the law. I don't have a record. I do remember once, I was really into weed in high school, and of course, 420 is, if you don't know the math, 4 people put 5 on. That's the song, I Got 5 on it. You put $5 on a 20 sack of weed. And so 420 at 4 p.m., you get a 20 sack, 4 p.m. every day for people who smoke weed all the time. And then the holiday, everyone goes crazy. So it's 420. I'm in Washington. It's Fast and Furious era. I got my Honda Civic. I got my, my short shifter, my subwoofers. And like I'm driving around visiting friends or whatever, and I'm like smoking weed all day when I'm driving. Disclaimer, this is not condoned nor recommended, and this is illegal. And this is driving under the influence. And so what was fascinating though was, okay, it was like a long day and I was like pretty tired. And I picked some friends up in the evening. My friend Skylar, and then I'm with my friend Aaron. And so I've been smoking in the car all day long, you know? And this is like before vapes and stuff existed. So this is like a pretty pungent type of whatever. So I pick up the homies and we start driving, and sure enough, some lights start flashing in the rearview mirror. And I'm like, I am done. And like in the vehicle, I want to say like in the side console of the door is like 2-3 rolled joints, like just in the side of the door. And then in the trunk is like this box full of all kinds of different paraphernalia and like marijuana and whatever. And then one of the guys I'm rolling with is like dealing at the time, and he's got like a critical amount of due time amount of, you know, and these days marijuana is legalized in some states, even recreationally, but not then. And so what's it's a true story, right? But our friend's in the back, and he brought with him like a Slurpee that had alcohol in it. And we're all underage, of course, as well. We're not, I think I might have been 18, but I'm not 21 or whatever, or I might have been 17. So a cop rolls up, and he literally gets me out of the car, and he's talking to me behind the car, and he's like, I'm going to take you in now or whatever. And then it was something like, unless you let me search the car. And I was like, listen, sir, I'll let you search the car, but only under my supervision or something like that, or if I do it with you. And he's like, okay. So he searches the car, and my friends get out. They're waiting, and I think what happened. Oh, that's what he looked in. Skylar's in the back seat, and he goes, "What's in that cup, sir?" And then he smelled it. So Skylar got caught. He figured out there's alcohol in his cup, and then he's like, "What else do you guys have?" And I was like, "Listen, nothing, but." If you search the car. So he searched the car. And what was so wild was I was like watching the flashlight, and I think he was just like looking for like a case of beer or like alcohol of some kind. And somehow, I don't know if you could apply God's grace to this situation because I don't think that's how it works. But he flashlight all through the side things or whatever. It maybe looked like, because there was like trash in the door too. And he opened up the back, and there was no cases of beer or alcohol or anything else besides what was in that Slurpee cup. So poor Skylar, I don't know if it's poor, justice served. They called his parents. Sure. And he got picked up, so he wasn't able to keep going with us. And then they let us just drive off.
You
and
got
leave.
off the hook.
And so I think there was moments like that where, you know, it would have maybe been slightly life altering, especially if, you know, we all got associated with like trafficking or something. And so I do look back in moments like that where I say it is only by God's grace where I've made a ton of mistakes in my life. I've messed up a lot. And I know switch up a few things, and I could have been on a different path or could have gone down a different road. And I'm grateful that I have learned from and steered down a different path. So that's one of the.
At what kind of age would you say you kind of like shifted from, you know, some of that doing that kind of stuff to even, I know you were working at Red Robin before Think Media was built, but like, was it a slow shift over time that kind of just little things happen? I know you started working at a church, like, but like
there was a dramatic shift. So, you know, from there, I got expelled from Christian high school for partying and also for being in a pornographic video with 3 girls. So that's its own story. And I'm on a pretty down, you know, like a pretty wild life, as it sounds like. But then I get expelled, and it gets worse. I go to community college to finish out my my like high school, and I get into hard like rave drugs. I started getting into like the rave scene, so ecstasy, and I could still count, because, you know, I'll run into some people. I think I could count on 2 hands. I've done ecstasy less than 10 times probably, or something like that. Hippie flipped a couple times where you combine ecstasy and mushrooms and some different things like that. So, you know, I don't know, Joe Rogan and I could probably connect about some things on the podcast someday. And so But there was one night that things was really a turning point, and you could almost call it like a rock bottom. And it was a night where I just was partying too many nights in a row, which really messes with your serotonin if you're taking MDMA. Your serotonin's exhausted, so now you're just kind of on like the crack that it's cut with, meaning like the speed or however, because these are like street drugs. It's not like regulated. I never did crack, but like it's kind of like speed. And so I'm really kind of in this. I take like 3 pills in a night. We lose our friend Brian. He took like 8 pills. He's a dealer. This is also who you're hanging out with. I had found myself into a quite a precarious circle of friends.
Right.
And we were up all night. Yeah. And then one of the worst places to be in life is a rave at like 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning when everyone's coming down. Like it's pretty dark. It went from like a little, I want to swing from the chandelier. That song's about alcohol, isn't it? Whoever sang that. And alcohol addiction. And ultimately, you're coming down, you're kind of depressed, you're tired, the drugs are wearing off. And we lost our friend Brian. We lost him in the city. He was gone. And so our ride was gone. And I was with my girlfriend at the time. And so we hitched a ride with strangers, very generous of them, to take us. And we ended up at this house in Edmonds. And it's 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning. And we're around all these people that kind of have like this gangbanger edge to them. There's like weapons, cocaine, hip hop music blasting. It is 6:30 a.m. in Edmonds, Washington as well, like out of all places. And like the party is just getting started. And so I'm sitting there with my girlfriend at the time, having done drugs multiple days in a row, but they're all worn off. And I'm in probably an overly extreme kind of depressive situation, but I'm so grateful for it because I remember that exact moment. And as I'm observing my surroundings, I think to myself, I maybe have made a few wrong turns in my life. I maybe made a few decisions. How is it like the morning, the sun is rising and there's like bullets on the table and people are doing coke and like this is like, where even am I in the morning? So we actually we leave and we start walking the streets of Edmonds and I'm in a horrible spot. I'm treating my girlfriend really bad because I'm like yelling at her and I like hate myself. I'm like mad at her. I'm just mad at everybody. I'm like, what are we even doing? Like, why is this happening? I'm like breaking down and that it messes with your emotions as well. And here's what's wild. I actually had to go to Red Robin that day and do a double shift. And I remember I had to go to work. I still showed up. I popped another ecstasy pill just to get through work. At that point, you're just riding off the speed. My eyes were all yellow. And I remember team members, I looked jaundice and they were like, are you okay, dog? Like you look like you're going through some stuff. So when you call it rock bottom, I think I just put my body under such severe multiple days in a row that as soon as that shift got down, I like went home and crashed and I went into like a multi-day depression. And it was during that time, and I believe that God works in mysterious ways and sometimes he needs to get our attention and we need to be receptive. And when maybe life is going good and you're living that life and you're just having a lot of fun, you're not receptive. But I was in a very receptive place because I'm kind of like, man, I've seen the dark side of this stuff kind of, and like this has led me to, it all started as fun and games, but this is like the result of playing this life out to the extreme kind of. And I remember my stepdad mentioned to my mom, like, hey, what if, you want to see if Sean wants to go to Prairie Bible Institute, which is this tiny school in Alberta, Canada, 1 hour out of Calgary, Three Hills, Alberta. No one knows about this place. It's like 3,000 people live in this small town in the middle of the tundra. And in the winter, there's snow all around you and ice. And like 2,000 people in the school are the students of this small Bible college. And I would have never gone there before, but they brought it up. And as soon as they said it, it was my stepdad's idea, told my mom, I was like, I want to go. I was like, sign me up. And my thinking was, it wasn't even that I wanted to really go study the Bible or even really pursue God, but like the little bit of wisdom was I need to like change my surroundings. I need to get out of a cycle that I was in. I need to do something different, change my location. And that changed everything for me because then I went there. I took Old Testament and New Testament, and I'd been kind of casually in church with my family, but then I started to see in scripture for real. I'm like, oh, man, there's all these prophecies written thousands of years before Jesus existed that are true. So I started to build the building blocks up of my faith, be transformed by the word of God, started to like really develop a relationship with God and heal from a lot of things, because a lot of times a lifestyle like that comes out of emotional pain or, just different ways you're dealing with or seeking what you ultimately want, in life and what we were designed for. And I believe we were designed for a relationship with God. So all that to say is it was pretty dramatic. I had a few things here and there, like when I came on Christmas break from, I like quote unquote relapsed at a crazy level on Christmas break from Bible college. But that was the big turning point. And then I came back, got plugged into a church. And the reason I did, and that's when I got into video, was I loved all my friends. I still wanted to connect with them as much as possible, but I knew that my own self-discipline and self-control was not high enough. The reason I knew that was because I was on Christmas break. I went to hang out with my friends. They're passing a blunt around in the circle. And I remember the first time it came by, I was like, no, thanks, I'm good. I'm on a different path. The second time it came by, I was like, no, listen, I can, puff, puff, pass. I was like, no, I'm good. I shouldn't. Third time, no. Fourth time, I was like, all right, dog, dude, pass me, And so I kind of realized, like, what circle are you sitting in,
Sure.
And I was like, so Dang. That, like, I couldn't sit in that circle and actually be committed to my values and decisions. Like, to stay committed to the values and the life I wanted to live, I just had to be selective. So I committed to intern at the church where I met Jeff Moores, who got me into video, sight unseen. It wasn't that I knew anything about the youth group or that was my vision. It was actually, I just learned about a story in the Bible. King David, when he got in trouble with Bathsheba and ended up sleeping with somebody that wasn't his wife, and it caused a whole bunch of other trouble, was because he should have been at war. In the summer when kings go to war, he was just chilling at home, wandering on the balcony. When you're just wandering around with no purpose, with nothing to do, that's usually when you get in trouble. So I was like, I'm going to intern. I'm going to work at Red Robin. I'm going to stay busy. And then if, I can hang with my friends, hey, you come to me. Hey, come meet me at church. Hey, let's do this. I wanted to stay busy enough that I didn't just have margin in my schedule to get into trouble, if you will, which was a good decision. And then from there, that's the dominoes of getting into video and getting more disciplined and getting into a different cycle.
Well, I'm glad you kind of share that, because a lot of people, I think, just look at successful people and what you've built with Think Media, and they think, I think I do this a lot. I'm like, they just have it all together, just always been this way. So it's interesting to hear some of those early stages stories that, have developed into why I think you make a lot of the decisions and the way that you are. One of the questions that came in was, how do you stay motivated and productive in your work? And so can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think what's interesting about that is, as I went to Bible college back then, I was an entirely different person. I was not motivated. I did not have vision. I did not have a picture. Vision is a picture of a preferred future. I didn't have that vision. And so, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people cast off discipline. So we don't have discipline and motivation if we don't have vision. So I think capturing vision is the source of my motivation. Furthermore, that I'm quoting a verse in Proverbs when I say, where there is no vision, the people perish. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew, and the Hebrew word for vision there, it actually means prophetic vision. It means vision from God. So I'm very passionate about the Bible having principles that anybody can use from any faith, any background. But there's a limit to that. The ultimate life hack is a relationship with Jesus Christ. Like the ultimate, success principle is actually having a relationship with the Creator. Because I've learned, you can actually apply the principles of the Bible and never know the person of Jesus. And they're still successful. In fact, if you look around at anybody who builds true and lasting success and has things like, you can have integrity and all this kind of stuff, that's all in the Bible. It's always been there. But vision that comes from God is, I think, that's when you have an unstoppable fire. It doesn't mean you don't get discouraged. It doesn't mean you don't go through dark nights of the soul. But it's not just a good idea. It's a God idea. It's not just so. In that season, I plug into youth ministry. I plug into this School of Ministry Arts, is what it was called. It's like a local ministry school. I studied the Bible even more. I start getting around a real biblical foundation and start to develop a relationship with the Holy Spirit and understanding the word and prayer. And I build up that real foundation. When you ask, how do I stay motivated? That's the fire. I mean, I think it's a fire that the Christian has and should have. It's the Holy Spirit. This is our beliefs and what we know. We are the temple of God now. And God's Spirit lives inside of us, quickens our mortal bodies. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, we can reign in life. And so it's cultivating that fire. Paul told Timothy, he's like, do not neglect the gift that you have by the laying on of hands, but like fan it into flame. So I think it's number one, knowing that there's actually an internal impartation. And for me, it was capturing the vision of why do I ultimately want to do what we're doing today? It actually is to see people discover that there's a God who loves them and to see God's kingdom advanced. And I think that business is not just a good idea, it's God's idea. It provides for our families, it empowers people, it employs people. But I hope that Think Media macro, my vision is that it would be used to ultimately be a city on a hill, that people see us shining and ultimately give glory to God. And so there's this inner thing that's a lot deeper than views, a lot deeper than money, it's a lot deeper than all that stuff. And so that is the source, it's that vision, but then I have to fight for it and protect it. That's how I stay motivated. I learned, I think from Jim Rohn, he said, motivation is kind of like taking a shower. You need to take a shower every day or you start to stink. You need to invest and get your motivation every day or your attitude will start to stink. So you can't be passive about the habits that maintain motivation. So for me, it's like reading, prayer, the word, exercise, breathing, eating well, sleeping well. If I start to lose motivation, I start to do like a diagnostic. Am I tired? I should probably rest. How have I been eating? I've been eating out a lot, eating a lot of desserts and stuff. I should probably clean up my diet. I just go back to those practical things. And a lot of times, if I do what I can control, I find that now reverse it. If you eat poorly 6 days in a row, you feel horrible on the 7th. If you eat healthy and have good rest and you stay hydrated 6 days in a row, you feel good on the 7th. So there's like a real practical side and then like a real spiritual side to it. And then it also goes into, part of my faith is belief and commitment in a local church. A lot of people like to say, I'm self-made. I'm like, I'm not. Dude, I'm God-made, man. I did it on my own. I didn't. I mean, not only is this a team thing at Think Media, but the team thing is a local church. It's being connected to those who are planted in the house of God will flourish. And so I have studied and pursued what are the habits and routines and lifestyles of somebody that maintains motivation, guards their soul, experiences success. And success really isn't a mystery, because if you can figure out what those habits, routines, and lifestyles are, the hard part is implementing it, but then just commit to those practices. That's kind of how we've tried to build our life, is build it on the principles you can discover in the Bible and then live that way. And therefore, I have had sustained motivation. And for what it's worth, I suppose that maybe ever since around 2003, 4, 5, we're going on 17 years of a pretty consistent setbacks, definitely some detours, definitely some seasons that have been tough and where I've lost ground. But the overall pattern has been like a long obedience in the same direction and just this steady uphill climb, I think, because of living this life.
I think, what it reminds me of is earlier you're talking about how that moment when you're in the car, there's bullets, there's drugs, it's like, you're like, whoa, how did I get here? It was actually a slow progress to this point where you opened your eyes. And I think it seems to be, at least for you, true in the opposite direction, that, a lot of people have that moment where now they're going in a different direction, but it's still a slow progress over time. And then you open your eyes and you're like, there's this company, there's this team, there's this, and so I find that interesting that it works both ways. I love what you said there about one direction slowly over time. Another, just talking about vision too. Someone is curious if you can expand on some of the future goals and vision for Think Media.
Yeah. So, our Think Media's vision, ultimately Think Media's vision, is to teach business and marketing principles from the Bible. And that might sound funny because we're really getting spiritual in this episode, but we typically don't go here. I think it just goes back to where else would we get them? You know what I mean? It's like, would you get them from just a good idea, something that's just worked in the last 2 years? It goes back to that thinking. And when I say business and marketing, they'd be like, don't you teach video? If you really take it back, communication won't go away. Business won't go away. The need to market and get your message out there won't go away. So vision is something you want to be bigger than just what it is you're doing today. I don't see YouTube going anywhere in 10 years. YouTube could be here for 20, 30 years. Maybe it's going to be a 100-year-old company. But if our vision contained the word YouTube, our vision would be too small. So that's why our vision is, okay, how, and I'm kind of butchering it, but it's a more expansive type of a thing. So saying that's where you and I were talking about, not just the Think Media channel where we talk about YouTube and video, but what if we had Think Social Media? Like, could we have other channels? Interestingly enough, in terms of the different vision and picture we have, growing up, as I'm driving around on 420 listening to Wu-Tang, I've always been inspired by the Wu-Tang Clan because they were 9 individual artists that teamed up to build one strong brand that ultimately promoted their individual projects, though. And many of them probably would have been successful on their own, but the Wu-Tang has built such a bigger brand than any one of them could have built on their own. And so that's partly what we're trying to do here at Think Media. I think what we understand is, yes, YouTube is the main thing and video is the main thing. But with our brand, can we bring on other content creators? Can we launch future YouTube channels? And then we are also self-aware that we are an education company. And so that would mean books, videos, courses, events, and all of that can expand. I see no limit to it. I also want to create a vision big enough that remarkable people like you and other Think team members, your vision could live inside it so long as you want to be a part of what we're doing. And so you had even mentioned a passion for filmmaking. There's been many people a few that have had that same passion at Think Media. And so I also am like, I don't fully know what it's all going to look like, but I do think that we, especially I've always wanted to have money for the mission, and I've always wanted to be able to fund art. So just in the next couple of years, like maybe we do make a documentary and it gets distributed on YouTube or it's paid on Amazon Prime, Netflix. So for sure in media, for sure in creativity. And that's maybe like, we see a super bright future in the creator economy. If I niche down, our current mission, we say help 10,000 purpose-driven people create a full-time living doing what they love while making a difference on YouTube. And again, the difference between mission and vision, the mission is like a measurable target that we're working on right now. It's something we could reach. It wouldn't be bad. Then we up-level it. And so we are tracking that in Monday.com and our Slack thread and the silver play button pictures and all the stuff we're getting. So we're obsessed with that mission at this moment. But we've also expanded that recently where, to summarize the phrase, we're on a mission to double the creator economy. So we're an education company teaching people a set of skills. That's also kind of a wider mission because it'll always be bigger. If the creator economy is 50 million content creators, now we're trying to make it 100 because we're so excited about it. There's no better way to be able to express yourself, work from home, honor your family, work with your kids, design your own path. It's a very exciting industry. So on a mission to double the creator economy. And in the near term, I do feel like we're called to do events. We've done Growth Video Live 5 times. We're taking a break in 2023, but to be hosting an event, to have a coaching program, we are going to be launching a mastermind, future courses, more videos, more channels, more of the same. And then again, lastly, I mentioned it, but maybe what I've learned from ministry, it's what I see in the Bible, what I see from other teams. I I think a good leader amplifies those around them, and a good leader is not a dictator. So I also hope that I try to be inclusive in the shaping of the vision. I understand that someone leads the charge, someone does have to maybe have the final say and make decisions, but a question rather than, hey, Sean, where do you want to go? My question to the Think Media team is where do you want to go? Where do we want to go together? And knowing that maybe I still would be that final decision maker. Sonia and I are the founders of the company. We want to have big ears and open let. I think that the best ideas or clarity about our future is a community thing. I'm trying to create a community thing and not a dictatorship, if you will. And so we're still seeing how that goes. It's pretty wild how early we still are. It's amazing what we're experiencing. But this industry is so wild that I have heard some people say it's good to have a 1, 5, 10-year vision. And in certain areas of life, we do, especially as we think about kids and where are they going to grow up or go to school or preschool or homeschool and all this kind of stuff. We have those kind of things. But the creator economy is so wild. It's like 4 minutes ago, AI comes out, Chat GPT comes out, and now like the whole world's flipped upside down. Like it's like people saying this is going to change everything, and that's probably not an understatement. So if you're making an unflexible 10-year plan, forget that, even a 1-year plan, there's so much stuff happening in this industry that I think there almost needs to be, you want to have like that kind of core, you don't want to just be blown around by trends, but you got to have a willingness to like switch things up in real time. And so we're kind of pulling on both parts, trying to figure it out as we go.
No, it's awesome. This kind of is, we had some questions come in about money.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to run a few of these by you. Someone asked if you invest your money and what and where are you investing? And then could you follow that up with some, it just ties with it, some lessons you've learned about investing and building wealth?
This is something I'm learning that I personally need to get educated on, and I need to continually get educated on. A book that did change my life was Rich Dad, Poor Dad around 2007, changed my thinking. And that was initially the first thing I focused on. I don't think it's definitely not right for everybody. You got to carve your own path. But I went all in on basically one thing, which is kind of like betting the whole farm. I would say that Sonia and I don't think we invested in retirement until the last 2 years. I'm 39. We started retirement when I was 37-ish, maybe 36, but that would have been the earliest. We are now incredibly blessed. We've been blessed for a while at Think Media, but the last 2-3 years, things got remarkable. Prior to that, it was like, this is it. This is like all we got. And so that was sort of the idea. And that model would be the start your own business model. We started our own business. And that I think that the solopreneur side hustle thing actually is something that every single person listening to this should invest in. Mm-hmm. The idea of building like a team that's pretty complex with like an HR department and PLs and P&Ls and all this other stuff. I don't know if actually not everybody is called to probably be the principal person, the lead person doing that. They should maybe link up with somebody else. So I was less wired of like, not thinking about 401k or stocks or even IRAs or whatever. Like we've probably been doing those only the last 5 years. And the problem with that is the sooner you start investing, there's just so many, if you start early and you just compound, like even your age, like you're set, bro. You know what I mean? Like if you just stick with where we're literally talking about, maybe I was 10 years plus past when you're maybe thinking about some basic Roth IRA, among other things. But the cool thing was I bet the whole farm, and Sonia and I, and it was cool to see what happened. Now we are thinking about defined benefit plans is one thing that we're doing, which is a good tax. It's a tax savings.
Any real estate investments that you guys?
Real estate wise, we've been getting really educated with simply, we just bought a house in Vegas and a house in Washington, and the real estate investment in Washington was an Airbnb. The first value was family, so we could be up there now that we have a couple kids. But then there was a couple other things. At the time, interest rates were low. We found a house off market. We found a good deal. We got it going. But we set it up as an Airbnb, and we learned that if you materially operate it, meaning that you manage it yourself, you can get a benefit of what a real estate professional gets of accelerated depreciation or bonus depreciation. So that's a huge tax savings. Plus it earns income, plus different write-offs and things. And so, which as your business is profitable, that becomes a whole. One of my biggest educations is probably taxes, because of people like Ryan Pineda, Matt Bontrager, and now being a part of masterminds and stuff. No matter who you are, one of the biggest bills you will ever pay is taxes. So people are like, oh, my biggest bill is my mortgage. My biggest bill is that. Like for a lot of people, you're paying 20 to 25% of your income to taxes. And then as for a business owner, like, oh, business owners do too. Like everybody is. And as you go up, you're paying 37% at highest tax brackets. If you're living in California and you have a couple other taxes, guys like Graham Stephan would say, if you're living in California with a biz like his, you're paying 50% or more in taxes. So learning about legitimate write-offs and all that, that's a huge one. And I would point people towards the 3-part series we did with Matt Bontrager here on the Think Media podcast for that topic. And so, yeah, we're looking at real estate, but one of the biggest things, and I've got this advice, and maybe I'm just really understanding it now, is my friend Pedro said this, is he's like, don't let the tail wag the dog. And he said, like, at the end of the year, people start thinking about write-offs, and they start thinking about like, okay, if I buy a 6,000 pound vehicle, I can write the whole thing off this year. And then I get like 30% off of it. And you're like, yeah, but if it was $100,000, you still spent $77,000. You didn't even need the vehicle. Did you even need the vehicle? And if you wanted it, still, did you even need it? And then there's all kinds of like loopholes. And I heard Alex Hormozi say this as well. You got to protect your focus. And so as I get into real estate, I'm looking for more passive syndications and things like that, because the greatest thing I can control is focusing on think. The greatest thing I control is focusing on think and then focusing on recovery and rest. And so getting too distracted in something I don't know. But in the meantime, I'm still chipping away at stocks or chipping away at education. I do want to get into like dividend stocks to have a little cash flow there. And then I'm trying to just continue to up my education and get around smart people. And so Sonia is also a big expert, and she's our chief financial officer of Think Media. And thank God for her. She managed our checkbook when we were young, broke, 21, newly married. She was the CFO of our, $30,000 a year empire. And now she's the CFO of a multi-million-dollar company. And people who scrutinize our books from the outside are like, this is insane. Her attention to detail and different things. So we are definitely being thoughtful. And then back to that, it goes into things like we like to reinvest. When you talk about what do you invest in? I mean, we took our team to Disney last year, and why spouses and kids. So one, it's a business trip, but when I think about investing, I want to reinvest in my business, reinvest in our people, reinvest in most of the time you say, hey, we need this computer, you and Kyle, and I'm like, well, help.
Mainly Kyle.
Kyle has 18 monitors and he has a monitor dedicated to Slack. Like it's just this vertical. I'm like, you need a Slack monitor? And ultimately, like when I think about investing in, if it'll help us go faster, reinvest in the business. And that's why, like, if we want a car, whatever, but who cares about the stupid car? But like if it's a computer, internet speed, build out the studio, get the camera, get the lenses, trying to think about raises. And I'm asking how can, what is the pathway for people who work at Think Media to become millionaires? And what are the vehicles we can install in terms of how do we build, whether that's investing or building a fund where we get equity in brands and all the above. And as people get raises, and as we bring, that's one of my visions too, is to bring financial education into Think so that people are, because it's not just the money you make, it's also how you invest it and maybe having different vehicles and opportunities and asking the question of what does private equity look like and how do we do different things like that. So
obviously investments can be, risky. And I just remember when I came on, Growth Video 1 was a big investment that you guys made into the business. But the question is, what's the riskiest business move you've ever made? And what was the outcome?
Yeah, well, that's probably the answer, because first, when we met, or right around the time we met, you came and kind of were the vlogger documentarian of Growth Video Live 1. And that was a 6-figure investment. And so it cost
Not just for me to film. So it was a big investment.
So that was $100,000. And at the time it was super scary. And that's a lot of money no matter how you slice it. But that was the hotel and the cost and everything else to pull off our first ever event. And the video, which we can link, it's definitely where it's kind of a cool piece of history and there's a lot of nuggets in it. We'll put it in the show notes, is risking $100,000 in Vegas was like the title, because we were risking on that first event. What's funny is that is the risk I think we compounded the most, because fast forward to 2022, we take growth video to another level. It's the first year was in person. We didn't know if we were going to do it the second year, and it was in person. We called it a 1 day. It turned out to be like a day and a half and the night before. So everything always, that's a 1 day for me, is a 3 day. And then the pandemic happened. So we were virtual 2 years. Those were the leanest years and arguably the most profitable because overhead is so low. I don't even know if that's true, but I mean, at least they're very low risk because it's like running a virtual event. And then we swung for the fences to hire Gary Vaynerchuk to speak at his full keynote fee at the time, which has gone up in 2022. And as we knew it was risky on a lot of levels. We didn't really know if lockdowns would be softened enough, if people would actually come. We didn't really know where COVID was going to be at. But by the end of our second virtual event, our 4th year, we made a couple decisions. We locked in Gary, and we locked in, I think, the M Hotel. And so it was like all in, like back to taking a bet. And so Gary's like $155,000. So our first event only cost 6 figures. His keynote fee cost more than our first entire event. In our first year of Think Media proper, we only made like $160,000 top line. Basically, we paid Gary V
The business.
the entire revenue of like every contractor and like Sonia and I living off it and every expense and every travel. So it speaks to building up your value and what a keynote speaker. And while that actually, for some people, it might be hard for them to digest, it's supply and demand. It's his time and it's the value that he brings, because definitely people love Gary and he's known, he's influential, and it can lead to ticket sales having him speak. So that was just the first decision. What was so funny, and this is one of the things that was the theme of the first event, was one of my mentors, Brett Johnson. He has a quote and a tattoo that says, "Scared money don't make money." So we've tried to learn that at Think Media. Like, you do have to take risks. They can be calculated, but scared money don't make money. You gotta reinvest in your business. You gotta try something. You also gotta be able to reinvest in your business even if you lose, because you don't invest enough that it would destroy you.
Yes.
That would be too much risk. But if you make 4 investments and 2 fail, but 1 does all right and 1 wins big, scared money don't make money. You had to actually be willing to, like, it's okay to lose. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And so Growth Video Live 2022 was by far the absolute greatest stretch for us. We'll link up in the show notes a conversation that I did with Chris Dew about that from the future. We broke down it was about an hour and a half conversation, and I went into all the metrics and analytics but on a macro, that event ended up costing us almost $1 million. It was $917,000. That's not counting paying the Think Media team or human resources. So with the time it took to set it up and ramp into it, now it also, not only was it profitable on ticket sales, but it was also profitable because of the offer we made. So it was a risk that paid off, and then the dividends of the brand and the reach and the up level, because you went from a virtual event to like an A1 top 1% of events in the world, at least in terms of the scope and the scale and the speaker lineup. Alex Hormozi, Patrick Bet-David, Gary Vaynerchuk. It was a major stretch, and it came with a lot of stress and pressure. And I think that we at the Think Media team might look back on it and say we experienced a little bit of trauma, but no doubt about it, I think we'd also look back on it with joy, saying when you also take calculated risks and stretch yourself, those are your biggest seasons of growth. They change you, they transform you, you learn a lot. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, no pain, no gain. There was certainly pain in pulling off an event. We were punching above our weight class. And one of the reasons why we're taking a break this year, because people said, you're crazy. There's so much momentum. The brand is so strong. People loved it. Everyone who there wanted to come back. Was our theme this year is built to last, not because we couldn't have pulled it off this year. We could have, but we learned that we need an infrastructure, specifically team members that aren't just fully busy in another department and we're all rallying to try to pull something off that's too heavy, but to either shift the org chart around, hire the right people, and build an infrastructure that if we're going to keep doing an event like that, that's in and of itself, that's not its own, it would be its own small business. But like if we could have an event that costs us $1 million to run and can bring in 1.2 to 1.5, or that ranges in this $1 to $3 million range, I see that as becoming its own vertical. Back to like the vision question, that should have, it could have its own staff or its own director, its own, and it hasn't. It's been like, we're already really busy and let's also throw an event. So the reason we're taking a year off is to like get the infrastructure around it healthy, get it basically kind of get it optimized in its own vertical with at least 1 or 2, 3 staff members devoted to that. And of course we all rally around it, but that way it's not an unsustainable pace to try to keep running that event.
That's really good. The next question is more personal.
Yeah.
And it's, what's your biggest fear when it comes to business and entrepreneurship? I don't know if anything comes to mind, but just thinking through that question, is there something that comes to mind that you want to share?
I mean, my biggest fear ultimately is that I would experience success and lose my soul. And without being super spiritual about it, let's go more practical. At the end of my life, I want the people closest to me to love and respect me the most. And at the end of my life, I don't want to, if I gain the applause of the crowds, but I lose the love and respect of my children, I believe I've failed. So actually, of course, I've got a ton of emotions tied up in Think Media. I've got a ton of, I want things to go well here, but like, am I afraid of if we have a good run, but if it was to quote unquote fail, I'd say no. Like I feel like I'm playing house money now. Like I feel like I've already won. I've already exceeded in terms of people. Maybe it was you said, we were sitting at the steak place with the Think Media team 2 nights ago, Herbs and Rye here in Vegas. And I'm like, I'm 39. And you're like, when you were 30, did you picture yourself sitting here? And I was like, I didn't even know this steakhouse existed. So absolutely not. I did not, but I think I'm already like, wow, look at where we are. And I want to steward it. More than anything, I just want to be faithful. And from my standpoint, these are my core beliefs that I've integrated. It's kind of like, not my will, but your will be done, God. Like if Think Media, where does Think Media go? And just, God, what do you want next? Because I think ultimately a life that is successful, but is successful without God or his plan is not a successful life. So it's like, if all of this is such a blessing and it's so overwhelming. Like I'm just so grateful to be here and to have all this, but I also like to have the thought exercise is if this went away, would I be okay? So where's my worth and my value? Is it in all this stuff that's happening? Or is it in that, like, if this went away, of course I want to be able to like pay the bills and whatnot. But as Sonia and I are trying to be smart with our finances, like we're starting to hit moments where we're like, that part's taken care of. So then what ultimately, like, and I know that I would be very difficult because I feed off of, it sounds funny. I'm really not motivated by money. I'm business minded, but like, to me, it is about the game, the significance, the impact. I love building leaders. I love the team. I love the community, all this stuff that we're building. And it's about building. I love being a builder. But I think I heard Gary Vee say too, he's like, what would happen if it was all torn down and you started from zero? It'd be like, I don't know, I'll just start building again. Because if you're a builder, or I just build the next thing, or I just move on. So I think my greatest fear is actually to have wild success, but to lose the things that matter most in the process. And that, I'm self-aware enough to know that that's actually where my dark side would go. Me at the extreme is not investing in friendships or family if I left my ambition unchecked. And I am careful. I don't agree with, nor do I want to be influenced by some. There are people, it sounds funny. It sounds funny maybe to our podcast listeners, or maybe it doesn't. There are some people who are like, F your family, man. Like it's fine, but like, it's all about money. It's all about business. Like, your wife's either on board or not, dude. You got to just build, just go for it. Like, no, like it's a team thing. Like it's a marriage. It's a covenant.
I think that stems from it's kind of a selfish point of view in the sense that, because I've heard, clips and stuff. And obviously I think you and I, it's an interesting conversation because it's like your wife should support, what you're doing and all these things. And sure, but like at the cost of what?
Yeah.
And I think I just want you to talk a little bit more too, just even about you and Sonia and how you guys work together. Cause you guys support each other, but I'm sure like, I know, and you're talking about it already, it's like, you're not going to build Think Media at the cost of your marriage. And I think some people, maybe they wouldn't just say it that way, but they are like, well, find a wife that supports your business. And I get that, but I mean, what would you just say to like someone who wants to build a YouTube channel? They want to get into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And maybe their wife or husband actually isn't supportive of that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any advice there or.
No, it's a good question. I think that, like, I believe that marriage is for life. I believe you should do whatever you can to make marriage work. I do believe that there are reasons that marriages should end, and that can be even, that's biblical in some cases. But for the most part, if you've committed to marriage, what's interesting, this is kind of true about you and me as well, is, and this would be a real dark path, but like, we got married before any of this existed. Sonia and I did. We got married at 21. So I need to honor, and like, this is maybe a narrative you see in a movie or something, that's like somebody has friends or family or people with them when they had nothing, and they get something and they burn all those bridges. And I there's men who do that. I mean, there's probably like equal opportunity, but like once, because imagine this, like, okay, now you have money, you have people sliding into your DMs, you like fame just opened every door for you. And so it's the guy who like is like, cool, like nobody knew me, no whatever, but now like I could get rid of these people because I could do this now. And I mean, to me, that's the darkest path that you could possibly walk down. And not only is it selfish, but it's also you would be selling out for money or sex or whatever. And the opposite being that I think for what's very interesting about our marriage is we have to grow together. It would be a whole different situation if I'd been single for up until this point, and I would be in a different situation of, dating and what I'm looking for in a spouse and so on and so forth. But I'm not only going to honor my marriage, but I also believe God has brought us together. And then once you make that commitment, you make it work. And that's kind of my point. If you're listening to this and you're single, I think it's incredibly wise. You have a blank slate to think about, okay, what are the attributes? What do I see the vision as? What do I want the wiring? We've had Alex Hormozy spoke at our event, and Layla's been on the podcast, and they talk about how like they both linked up knowing they were like, we don't want to do anything but work. We may not want to have kids. We want to work all the time. And we're unified in that. And like when the timing of when they got together, whatever, they seem like a really good match. The flip side, back to your question ultimately, and I think something that, again, what if you don't have a spouse that's supportive now? Well, I think you have to be empathetic to the fact that like, this might be new. So it's like you're bringing up an entirely new thing. You're trying to go in an entirely new direction. And yes, your spouse should change with you and go with you. But at the same time, like if you're switching up some of that original stuff, it is a conversation. It is an evolution. And I think it's kind of terrible if you just go, well, I've become a new person. I'm going a new direction and I'm leaving you behind. That's kind of cold, you know? And I think that what were your original vows?
Exactly.
And then I think, you know, for the spiritual listener, I do think that prayer and patience can be a good guidance. This is what I've learned. I also really believe that if we prayerfully are and practically pursuing the right spouse, that person is actually a compliment to you in a lot of ways that you may not realize. Here's what I mean. I don't know if Sonia is the best partner for me to help me grow to the maximum speed of growth and maximum amount of money. And that is the biggest blessing in the entire world. Because if it was an inheritance gained too early in the beginning, won't be blessed in the end. I am like a hot air balloon that will just endlessly fly higher and higher. I'm like Icarus. I'll fly too close to the sun and my wings will melt. Sonia is like some weights. So some people could say, I feel like my partner or my spouse is holding you back. Maybe true. Or maybe they're keeping you grounded and they're keeping you. And so I could be the unrealistic dreamer and she lives in reality. And so again, if I was pure pedal to the metal, as we talked about, my personality is certainly a little bit addictive, a little bit extreme. And so it's nice to have, therefore, what could seem frustrating if your spouse feels like they're just kind of poking holes in your YouTube vision, you shouldn't be feeling like, oh, they're being so negative. That's an opportunity for them to be refining the vision, for there to be more communication that could be leading you to some better timing. Sure, there may be some situations where it is very frustrating. It could get toxic. We're not therapists, and this is not counseling, and we recommend getting into counseling. But for what it's worth, from that perspective, again, I think that you got married young as well, and so it's going to be such an evolution. And I think that being in communication, letting it grow, like us, we moved to Vegas. That was hugely disruptive in my wife's life. All of our family, though, now that we have kids on both sides, is in the Northwest. Sonia has sacrificed a ton for the last decade plus. She definitely felt called that we should go here, but it wasn't like her first, kind of choice. So there is that give and take. And I think marriage gets weird, or partnerships get weird if you get super controlling and super selfish and there's no give. If it's all just take, and if you forget where you came from, and if you forget who got you there and forget who helped you build there, and if you get arrogant or prideful so as to think that, well, cool, you got me here, but now I can go alone. And it's a sad story. And unfortunately, it breaks my heart. One of the most, speaking to men that back out on their families or back out on their spouses or back out on their kids. I have no respect for that. And we're like, okay, cool. I'm glad you got us here, but now I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to do me. No, bro, you shouldn't be doing you. You should be honoring your family. And that's where I'm coming from.
And I think people change over time. So, it's like, I want to start a YouTube channel. I want to start a business. And I think a lot of it too is building trust in the sense that it's like, if I go to Madeline and I'm like, I want to start this new thing, it's like, she knows me better than I actually know myself. And you might just be, is this just another thing you're trying to start? And you're just not self-aware, and you're bitter and frustrated but you're actually just always moving on to the next thing, and you're not just committed to one thing. So I think a lot of it too is like, be faithful with the small stuff that you are given, and maybe you have a little bit of free time right now. And what are you doing in that free time to actually keep your word of like, when you're like, this, I want to go all in on this, it actually makes sense. And it's not just like, oh, this is another thing. I think, it's being self-aware and just keeping ourselves, even if you're single, accountable to that. You're also going to turn 40 here soon. I'm just curious, as we wrap up, your thoughts coming into turning 40. And I want to hear these next 10 years, when you turn 50, where do you want to be, just emotionally, physically, spiritually? Like where do you see yourself?
Yeah, I've been, the top of my one is health, because if I have one thing I would have really done differently, is I would have paid more attention to my health from like 20 to 32 because I have like repetitive strain injury, repetitive stress injury, kind of like a carpal tunnel, some nerve stuff. I'm actually optimistic that it'll all get worked out, and I'm addressing it right now. But it's the result of overwork, and then maybe not even overwork, but not working out and doing the strength training and different things in combination with it and taking proper breaks. Speaking back to compulsive and just working so hard, and again, not necessarily working out the strength of the infrastructure. So I am wanting to get into the best shape of my life between now and my 40th birthday, and also just live a healthier life on my way to 50. I think that as I think about this, I also think about 40s as a prime. I feel like I'm 40 years young on November 6th this year. And there's different people that say like in your 20s, you're kind of like figuring the things out. In your 30s, you're doing this thing. In 40s. And so I think I am thinking about legacy, which would mean like mentorship. I want to mentor leaders. Success without a successor is failure. I want to be smarter. I feel like as I turn 40, I've been through enough pain and challenges and business lessons, and not even enough, they're ongoing, but that you get wisdom in terms of seasons. I've lived through recessions. You're like, it's funny. And you start thinking like, dude, I sound like my parents, but you're like, wow, it actually is that experience. And I would argue evaluated experience. Like I have been evaluating my experience. I'm an avid journaler and an avid note taker. And I document things that are happening in my life, things that I'm praying about, things God's speaking to me, things that I'm seeing in the Word, and situations that are happening. Because I do feel called to write books and to teach and train out of some of this deeper stuff. So I could see some of that happening in my 40s. I'm also now, it's everyone's on a different path, but we're maybe a little bit older with some young kids, and we're thinking about having more. So we've got, a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. So now we're thinking about school, homeschool, preschool. And so when I'm 50, I'm going to have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old at least. And so that's interesting. And so thinking about the family piece, which is a different pace. I think it was God works all things to the good. We've people that know our story, we've had health challenges. My wife almost died. So we had kids later in life, mainly because of how that disrupted our life. The blessing of that though was no kids until 37 meant Think Media is where it is. It meant that I was able to focus on that, to just hustle, work extra. And even the pain in my arms or whatever, I'm always like, I know I could have done it differently, but like, you can't have regrets. I'm like, it's just the work you put in. I think about it for like Sean Bradley and legacy and stuff. I'm like, I want to be very empathetic comparing computer labor to like physical labor.
Yeah.
But it literally is tears in the muscle and tendon strain and different things. And I'm like, it's kind of like, like grandpa put in the work. Like he really worked himself to the bone to set up the next generation. So I'm starting to like almost have that mentality, like how am I setting them up? And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't change it for that regard, for like laying the railroad track that hopefully future generations can drive on. And that's the dream. It's not about, I want to build a platform, not so I can stand on it, but so others can stand on it. And that my ceiling should be the next generation's launching pad, as well as just everyone who connects to Think Media's launching pad. So I'm thinking about legacy. I'm thinking about health. I'm thinking about family. And I'm thinking about sustainability. Our theme this year at Think Media is built to last. We will have a new theme every year, but these themes are not like they come and then we reject them. I feel like they're building blocks. And that's what I'm kind of thinking about, is how do we build to last, not just for a year, but for decades. And that's sort of what my mindset is.
I love that. Thank you for answering those questions, for being open and broken. A lot of good questions came in from the team, and I can speak on just behalf of Think Media. We're grateful for you, Sonia, and just the team and the culture you guys have built. And so I'm excited to just be a part of this mission to help the creator economy, to help people go full time. And so it's been fun so far. I'm excited to just keep going. And if you haven't subscribed to the Think Media podcast yet, bro, what are you even doing? Hit the subscribe button, click on the screen. You guys can watch another video, and we'll see you in the next one.